of GOP healthcare bill. President Donald Trump convened a strategy session over steak and succotash at the White House with senators Monday night, trying to plot an uphill path to repealing Obamacare and replacing it with a GOP alternative. He made an impassioned pitch on why Republicans needed to do it now, and the political peril they could face if they didn't repeal and replace after promising to do it for years. He also vented about Democrats and the legislative process. He basically said, "If we don't do this, we're in trouble," said one person briefed on the meeting. "That we have the Senate, House and White House, and we have to do it or we're going to look terrible." Meanwhile, two senators, neither invited to the dinner, were simultaneously drafting statements saying that they couldn't support the current Senate health care bill. They released the statements just after Trump's White House meal concluded. Trump had no idea the statements were coming, according to several White House and congressional officials. His top aides were taken aback, and the White House was soon on the phone with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. The abrupt collapse of the current plan blew up at the White House wanted for months and undoubtedly set back Republicans in their goal to overhaul President Barack Obama's legislation. It certainly frustrated a number of the president's top aides, who have negotiated to the letter certain packages for certain senators for a summer solution. But Trump, who has not fretted over the details of the proposed legislation, seemed ready to try something else, trading ribeye negotiations for his favorite pastime. Within an hour, Trump was back on Twitter, where he put forward a different idea, one he has posited privately for months, after talking to McConnell and top aides. Republicans should just repeal failing Obamacare now and work on a new healthcare plan that will start from a clean slate. Dems will join in. He tweeted. "Trump is fine doing it that way," said one White House aide, "as long as something gets done." To Trump, the Obamacare fight has always been about scoring a win. He doesn't care nearly as much about the specifics, people close to him say, and hasn't understood why legislators won't just make deals and bring something, anything, to his desk. He has said publicly and privately he didn't understand it would take this long. "Nobody knew healthcare could be so complicated," Trump said in February. At a different point, he said only Middle East peace would be harder. Along the way, Trump has weighed various options, from not paying cost-sharing subsidies and letting the law implode to repealing it without a replacement, which he veered back to Monday night on Twitter. "He told us months ago we could just let it blow up and blame the Democrats," said one activist who met with Trump at the White House. He praised the conservative version of the law passed through the House in a Rose Garden fete before trashing it as mean in a meeting with moderate senators. Earlier Monday evening, just after Sens. Jerry Moran, Arkan, and Mike Lee, R. Utah, announced their opposition, a White House official said the team would go back to working with individual members on the bill. There was no desire, this person said, to restart negotiations from scratch. White House officials said they purposely picked veteran lawmakers who they saw as allies to attend the dinner with Trump, not legislators they thought were on the fence. But the bill was already on a knife edge, with a vote delayed this week due to the absence of Arizona Senator John McCain due to a medical procedure. Trump has privately wondered why legislators don't seem to listen to him, and the blow from Moran and Lee illustrated the limits of the president's capacity to master the art of the Washington deal. "None of the people at the dinner were the ones they should have been worried about," said one person involved in the discussions. Trump allies have sometimes attacked Republicans. The White House needs to support the bill. He has alienated some senators with his unorthodox tweets and his inattention to policy details, even as they have praised others on his staff. He has sometimes expressed the view that Democrats would like to work with Republicans, as he did Monday night, even though his staff harbors skepticism. Why would Trump call McCain crusty Monday afternoon? One White House official asked. Because that's the word that came to his brain. According to several people briefed on the matter, Trump and McConnell were prepared to make similar statements Monday evening. But Trump preempted the Senate Majority Leader, sending a quick tweet that took even some of his staff by surprise. "There it is," one aide said, 2 minutes after promising news within an hour. "Regretfully, It is now apparent that the effort to repeal and immediately replace the failure of Obamacare will not be successful, McConnell said, in a missive from Don Stewart, his spokesman. A White House official, per usual policy, said Trump's tweet would speak for itself. Co-founder of firm behind Trump-Russia dossier will not testify before Senate next week. The co-founder of a political and corporate intelligence firm behind an explosive dossier alleging Russian intelligence influence over President Donald Trump will not testify next week before the Senate Judiciary Committee, according to two sources familiar with his plans. The committee on Wednesday announced a July 19 hearing that listed Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson, a former Wall Street Journal investigative reporter, as a witness. His inclusion raised the specter of public testimony about the dossier's seamy and contested claims of sexual misconduct and a years-long Kremlin conspiracy to get Trump elected. But the request for Simpson to appear was voluntary, and it's unclear whether the committee will seek to compel his testimony. Spokespeople for Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley of Iowa and Ranking Member Dianne Feinstein of California did not respond to requests for comment. During the 2016 campaign, Simpson's firm hired the British spy Christopher Steele, who ultimately produced the infamous dossier, which suggests Trump took part in an intricate Kremlin-backed plot to ascend to the White House. He and the White House have strenuously denied the allegations in the document. The decision by Grassley to call Simpson to speak publicly is one of the riskiest moves in Congress' 6-month-old probes into Russian meddling in the presidential election. And it amounts to a decision to rip the bandage off an investigation that has at times crawled along slowly. I think we need to find out what the facts are and let the chips fall where they may, said Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn, R. Texas, a member of the Judiciary Committee. The committee called Simpson, who helped establish Fusion GPS in 2009, to testify during a larger hearing about the role of foreign lobbying. Simpson hired Steele, a Russia expert, during the GOP primary, and Steele continued his work after Trump was picked as the nominee. In its 35 pages was a seamy tale of a years-long conspiracy by the Kremlin to recruit Trump as an ally, to blackmail him through business deals and to entrap him in acts of sexual misconduct. Trump famously rebutted the suggestion he engaged in salacious sexual activity when he described himself as a germaphobe. GOP budget would unlock special power for tax bill, with a catch. House budget leaders will unveil a fiscal blueprint Tuesday to launch the biggest tax code rewrite in a generation, but only if Republicans can simultaneously agree to steep cuts elsewhere. To unlock Congress' power to expedite tax overhaul this year, GOP lawmakers would need to slash billions from politically sensitive programs like food stamps, student aid, and federal pension funds. House Budget Chairwoman Diane Black, R. Tennessee, contends that her blueprint, unlike past budget documents, would serve more than a messaging purpose. Today, we are introducing not just a vision for our country, but a plan for action, Black wrote in a statement. With a Republican Congress and a Republican administration, now is the time to put forward a governing document with real solutions to address our biggest challenges. The ambitious plan calls for $203 billion in mandatory cuts, which would mark the largest amount of deficit reduction through the budget process in 2 decades. And forcing Republicans to combine their already complex push for tax reform with massive funding reductions would be a risky maneuver. Some GOP lawmakers have already said they are worried about the potential political attacks if they're seen as cutting programs like temporary assistance for needy families to pay for billions in tax breaks. The House Budget Committee is expected to approve the proposal Wednesday, though it remains unclear whether the plan would garner enough support to pass on the House floor. The idea of mandatory spending cuts has already created tension within the fractious GOP conference. Nearly 36 GOP centrists have balked at the idea of missing the chance for tax reform, while hardline fiscal hawks have demanded even steeper reductions. The blueprint would call for $203 billion in reduction from 11 committees that oversee large chunks of mandatory spending. I think this is a year where we can say we're making progress. "I've been here for almost 7 years, and we have never done real deficit reduction," Black told reporters earlier this summer. "I'm excited about that." The House Ways and Means Committee, which would do much of the GOP's tax writing this year, would be charged with finding the most mandatory savings, at least $52 billion. That could include cuts to programs like the Social Services Block Grant, temporary assistance for needy families, supplemental security income or disability insurance. The House Judiciary Committee would be tasked with the second highest amount of savings, with a total of $45 billion, most of which would likely come from medical malpractice reforms. The Education and Workforce Committee, as well as the Energy and Commerce Panel, would each need to produce $20 billion in savings, with another $10 billion from the House Agriculture Committee. Meanwhile, the clock has been ticking down. This year's House GOP budget markup will be the most delayed in recent memory, with the fiscal year ending in 11 weeks. The House is now less than 2 weeks from its summer recess, after which point a budget resolution would stand little chance of floor action. Passage of a full GOP budget, which would require uniting the party's most vocal military supporters and its fiercest fiscal conservatives, would be a decisive victory for Black. The first-term chairwoman, who has her eye on the Tennessee gubernatorial race next year, has spent months crafting a package to entice an increasingly divided GOP conference. Plenty of Republicans, including some close to leadership, have remained skeptical about the required mandatory cuts, raising doubts that the budget resolution would survive the Senate. Black has also packed the document with other conservative priorities that she hopes will be difficult for Republicans to resist in their first Trump-era blueprint, even if those ideas stand no chance of becoming law. The resolution hews closely to conservative budgets of years past, including the Medicare premium support model popularized by now House Speaker Paul Ryan, RWIS. It would also roll back large sums of Medicaid spending beyond the GOP's effort to repeal Obamacare, while stripping hundreds of billions from anti-poverty programs across the federal government. The conservative document would allow for revenue-neutral tax reform, while assuming a $1.1 trillion lower baseline from the House-passed Obamacare repeal. Because its authors had to assume the loss of about $2 trillion in previous years' savings from Obamacare repeal, this year's document would have slightly rosier economic assumptions. The plan would predict a 2.6% growth in GDP, above the current 1.9% growth estimates from the Congressional Budget Office but lower than the 3% figure the Trump administration has projected. Their fiscal 2018 plan would give a nod to President Donald Trump's most vocal promise, increased spending for the military and national security programs. But it would buck the president on his calls to preserve Medicare and Social Security.